So this is really a teaser. I have not uploaded slides that I don't know. I have some issues uploading, but I will do this after the call. So 5G and XR. So there was some initial work in release 16, release 17. There's quite some work, release 18. Again, really just an introduction. I have a few slides in the beginning just to give you a bit of a perspective. And then what has been the case is that you're basically moving into this world where the environment where the world becomes your desktop, right? So we have spatial XR compute. A lot of aspects are location. So you're outside in the world. You recognize spatial compute information and so on and so on. So that's kind of the umbrella of the XR. And there is another aspect that is very much discussed, is the metaverse, right? Which is XR as a technology, which includes new formats that include spatial computing. And then there's, if you go deeper, right, technologies that include then edge processing, running massive amount of data over the network and so on and so on. But then also components, you know, from the internet, from social aspects, and the idea of being an open environment. All of this contributes to the metaverse, right? And 3GP is not like a single approach to XR or saying metaverse. There's a study of mobile metaverse in release 19 right now in SA1 that has been started. But it's more like contributing and developing technologies in this area. So, and there's also an industry consensus on this metaverse XR, that there should be standards, right? Or openness supported by common exchange formats, common network protocols, APIs, common mapping data, and so on and so on. But it's not expected that a single organization will do this. I mean, there's some comparison to what was done for the web, right? With what was done through HTML and the development of browsers, but the browsers and all of this also heavily benefited from work being done in connectivity, then done in Wi-Fi connectivity, in 3GP, internet-based services, and so on. And then also open source environments, right? AR Cloud, open source, Linux Foundation, and so on. So there's an expectation of standards are needed across the board. Right? So then there is also, and that's where it connects a bit to the 5G aspects where have been analysis. So we're talking about new devices, and new devices are basically HMDs type of things, or glass, or a glass, something like this. And this is a reference design. And interesting enough, a glass like this, including a lot of compute, would require also a very careful design in terms of what processing is allowed. One of the key issues is you don't have area for heat dissipation. That means you need to operate on very minimum power. 500 milliwatt is very often set as a target for glasses of which you can consume. So this is very low. If you're a bit familiar, 500 milliwatt is very low. So you're basically looking also into architectures where you feed new devices, and what's happening is basically that you're using potentially today direct connection between a PC to an HMD, but in the future you also integrate your phone, connect your glass, and then there are also cases that you reduce the size, so that is still like an enterprise, so getting into smaller devices. But then there is ideas to basically that the phone connects through 5G and then you connect to the glass. And then you have ways that you basically potentially in the further future that you have a direct connectivity to your glass. So this is something which are architectures that are studied, and now you need to consider on how you basically create workflows such that media and can flow, that you basically also do discovery, connectivity, and so on and so on. What we did in SA4, we defined frameworks for XR and a bit more specific from AR. Don't expect me to go through these details, but It's basically, there's aspects here which decomposes the device into something that is the AR runtime. This is typically supported today by AR Core or OpenXR as a more standard. So a runtime giving you the ability to physically connect to the peripherals, cameras, sensors, and so on. Then you have a very GPU-centric environment, right? So where you do rendering, and then you have functions for compression and delivery running over the network. And then you have on the network supporting functionality as well, because you using, as Imad presented, functionalities that are compute on the edge, and that basically allow you to offload because you only have a limited amount of processing resources available. So there are workflows, and then there is also basically requirements that are documented here. Requirements for that allow you to be giving you a sense of presence and immersiveness, where you have latency requirements, there's latency requirements that are provided to you just to feel presence. Very often referred to this 20 milliseconds motion to photon latency. 20 milliseconds is very challenging. So you can compensate some latency, last minute latency, late stage reprojection in the device, but still there are requirements that require you to run latencies for between where you render the media until it's presented of something like 50 to 60 milliseconds. And now you can distribute this and can basically identify how can you set up this in physical connections? How can you make use codecs? How can you basically make use encoders? How you can render in the network? How can you use 5G functionalities on the system, the radio, to support these type of use cases? So there's a whole framework that looks into how you set up connectivity, how you distribute the processing in 2 technical reports referred to here out of release 16 and 17. Release 18, what we have started now is to document basic capabilities of a device like this. So what do you expect? What media, what functions need to be supported from a content delivery and so on. So we know that there will be a 5G system support, but also from a media, and that's documented here. And we have started in release 18 of going at device architecture that is a simplification of what you saw before, but with the idea to really specify requirements across the board. So now the last slide just on that one. I mean, what would it mean towards interop reference tools for XR and the metaverse? And I believe there is not a starting point to say we know what we need to do. The first aspect is identify use cases and scenarios, right? What device are we talking? Are we going to a phone, a VR HMD, an AR glass? It's an AR glass that is a consumer and enterprise, right? This is very, very case. There's use cases from delivering, streaming, something we do more today, right? To cloud gaming, conferencing. You could also think about XR production cases, right? How can you integrate this? How does it relate to 5G QS requirements? And QS is very broad here, bit rates, latency, very specific cross-layer APIs and so on. So there's work now starting in 3GP on this one is edge enablers, media requirements, media capabilities. Towards going there, I believe what is important is that we identify what exists, what are available reference frameworks towards XR Metaverse, test material, assets, scenes, content generation framework, game engines, Unity, Unreal, how you can basically make use of these type of things. Reference applications, games, conferencing, streaming applications, reference devices. What exists today, I mean, you can buy a HoloLens, a very expensive device. This is the reference design. What are the APIs? Runtimes for this renderers, AR runtimes, XR gaming-centric runtimes, and so on. I believe it's worthwhile that 5G Mac at some point looks into this, and but I also believe 5G Mac may partner with other organizations. We expect to have an announcement next week on new organization that is not the standards developing, but coordinating. So stay tuned on this one. And I believe what 5G Mac should bring, the 5G based media distribution reference tools and environments to this one. And I consider this very long term, but I mean, there might always be a good time to start. I leave it at this. Thank you.